Jodie Patterson, mother, social activist, author, and I'm really proud to be a part of the celebration of Toni Morrison's 50th anniversary of her book, The Bluest Eye. It's one of my favorites. It's a classic, and I return back to it decade after decade in its principle and in its meaning. I haven't read it in a while, but the sentiment behind it and the feeling behind it I return to, and particularly now in 2020, The Bluest Eye is still relevant. It is so very relevant when you look at America and you look at the world, right? Xenophobia, transphobia, racism, sexism, toxic male energy, capitalism, all of the things that pull us away from each other. The path forward, as I see it, is people, right? Knowing people, understanding people, right? And the reason why The Bluest Eye is so relevant is because it is about the interior lives of people, what goes on behind the door, in the brain, in the soul, under the skin. So I'm going to read a piece from The Bluest Eye. I haven't read it in years, and I wanted to do that so that it will be fresh. And then I want to talk to you about what it means to me today, right now. When Sammy and Bacola were still young, Pauline had to go back to work. She was older now, with no time for dreams and movies. It was time to put all the pieces together, make coherence where before there had been none. The children gave her this need. She herself was no longer a child. So she became, and her process of becoming was like most of ours. She developed a hatred for things that mystified or obstructed her, acquired virtues that were easy to maintain, assigned herself a role in the scheme of things, and worked and harked back to simpler times for gratification. She took on the full responsibility and recognition of breadwinner and returned to church. First, however, she moved out of the 2 rooms into a spacious first floor of a building that had been built as a store. She came into her own with the women who had despised her by being more moral than they. She avenged herself on Charlie by forcing him to indulge in the weaknesses she despised. She joined a church where shouting was frowned upon, served on stewardess board number 3, and became a member of ladies circle number 1. At a prayer meeting, she moaned and sighed over Charlie's ways and hoped God would help her keep the children from the sins of the father. She stopped saying children and said children. She let another tooth fall and was outraged by painted ladies who thought only of clothes and men. Holding Charlie as a model of sin and failure, she bore him like a crown of thorns and her children like a cross. It was her good fortune to find a permanent job in the home of a well-to-do family whose members were affectionate, appreciative, and generous. She looked at their house, smelled their linens, touched their silk draperies, and loved all of it. The child's pink nightie, the stacks of white pillow, slips edged with embroidery, the sheets with top hems picked out of the blue cornflowers. She became what is known as an ideal servant, for such a role filled practically all of her needs. When she bathed the little Fisher girl, it was in a porcelain tub with silvery taps running infinite quantities of hot, clear water. She dried her in fluffy white towels and put her in cuddly night clothes. Then she brushed the yellow hair, enjoying the roll and slip of it between her fingers. No zinc tub, no buckets of stove-heated water, no flaky, stiff, grayish towels washed in a kitchen sink, dried in a dusty backyard. No tangled black puff of rough wool to comb. Soon, she stopped trying to keep her own house. The things she could afford to buy didn't last, had no beauty or style, and were absorbed by the dingy storefront. More and more she neglected her house, her children, her man. They were like the afterthoughts one had just before sleep, the early morning and late evening edges of her day, the dark edges that made the daily life with the Fishers lighter, more delicate, more lovely. Here, she could arrange things, clean things, line things up in neat rows. Here, her foot flopped around on deep pile carpets, and there was no uneven sound. Here she found beauty, order, cleanliness, and praise. Miss Fisher said, "I would rather sell her blueberry cobblers than real estate." She reigned over cupboards stacked high with food that would not be eaten for weeks, even months. She was queen of canned vegetables bought by the case, special fondants and ribbon candy curled up in tiny silver dishes. The creditors and service people who humiliated her when she went to them on her own behalf respected her, were even intimidated by her when she spoke for the Fishers. She refused beef slightly dark or with edges not properly trimmed. The slightly reeking fish that she accepted for her own family, she would all but throw in the fishman's face if he sent it to the Fisher's house. Power, praise, and luxury were hers in this household. They even gave her what she had never had, a nickname, Polly. It was her pleasure to stand in the kitchen at the end of a day and survey her handiwork, knowing there were soap bars by the dozen, bacon by the rasher, and reveling in her shiny pots and pans and polished floors, hearing, "Ooh, we'll never let her go. We could never find anyone like Polly. She will not leave the kitchen until everything is in order. Really, she is the ideal servant." Pauline kept this order, this beauty, for herself, a private world, and never introduced it to her storefront or to her children. Them she bent toward respectability, and in so doing taught them fear. Fear of being clumsy, fear of being like their father, fear of not being loved by God, fear of madness like Charlie's mother. And to her son, she beat a loud desire to run away. And into her daughter, she beat a fear of growing up, fear of other people, fear of life. All the meaningfulness of her life was in her work, for her virtues were intact. She was an active churchwoman, did not drink, smoke, or carouse, defended herself mightily against Charlie, rose above him in every way, and felt she was fulfilling a mother's role. Conscientiously, when she pointed out their father's faults to keep them from having them, or punished them when they showed any slovenliness, no matter how slight, when she worked 12 to 16 hours a day to support them. And the world itself agreed with her. It was only sometimes, and then rarely, that she thought about the old days or what her life had turned to. They were musings, idle thoughts, full sometimes of old dreaminess, but not the kind of things she cared to dwell on. I started to leave him once, but something came up. Once, after he tried to set the house on fire, I was all set in my mind to go. I can't even remember now what held me. He sure ain't give me much of a life, but it wasn't all bad. Sometimes things weren't all bad. He used to come easing into bed sometimes, not too drunk. I make out like I'm asleep 'cause it's late, and he would take in $3 out of my pocketbook that morning or something. I hear him breathing, but I don't look around. I can see in my mind's eye his black arms thrown back behind his head, the muscles like great big peach stones sanded down, with veins running like little swollen rivers down his arms. Without touching him, I'd be feeling those ridges on the tips of my fingers. I see the palms of his hands calloused to granite and the long fingers curled up and still. I think about the thick, knotty hair on his chest and the two big swells of breast muscles. I want to rub my face hard in his chest and feel the hair cut my skin. I know just where the hair growth slacks out, just above the navel. and how it picks up again and spreads out. Maybe he'll shift a little and his leg will touch me, or I feel his flank just graze my behind. I don't move even yet. Then he lifts his head, turn over, and put his hand on my waist. If I don't move, he'll move his hand over to pull and knead my stomach, soft and slow like. I still don't move because I don't want him to stop. I want to pretend sleep and have him keep on rubbing my stomach. Then he will lean his head down and bite my tit. Then I don't want him to rub my stomach anymore. I want him to put his hand between my legs. I pretend to wake up and turn to him, but not opening my legs. I want him to open them for me. He does, and I be soft and wet, where his fingers are strong and hard. I be softer than I ever been before. All my strength in his hand. My brain curls up like wilted leaves. A funny, empty feeling is in my hands. I want to grab hold of something. So I hold his head. His mouth is under my chin. Then I don't want his hand between my legs no more because I think I'm softening away. I watch my legs open, and he's on top of me. Too heavy to hold and too light not to. He puts his thing in me, in me, in me. I wrap my feet around his back so he can't get away. His face is next to mine. The bed springs sound like them crickets used to back home. He puts his fingers in mine and we stretches our arms out wide like Jesus on the cross. I hold on tight. My fingers and my feet hold on tight because everything else is going. I know he wants me to come first, but I can't. Not until he does. Not until I feel him loving me. Just me, sinking into me. Not until I know that my flesh is all that be on his mind. That he couldn't stop if he had to. That he would rather die than take his thing out of me. Of me. Not until he has let go of all he has and give it to me. To me, to me. When he does, I feel a power. I be strong, I be pretty, I be young. And then I wait. He shivers and tosses his head. Now I be strong enough, pretty enough, and young enough to let him make me come. I take my fingers out of his and put my hands on his behind. My leg drops back into the bed. I don't make no noise because the children might hear. I begin to feel those little bits of color floating up into me, deep in me. That streak of green from the June bug light, the purple from the berries trickling along my thighs. Mama's lemonade yellow runs sweet in me. Then I feel like I'm laughing between my legs, and the laughing gets all mixed up with the colors, and I'm afraid I'll come and afraid I won't. But I know I will, and I do. And it be rainbow all inside. And it lasts and lasts and lasts. I want to thank him, but don't know how. So I pat him like you do a baby. And he asks me if I'm all right, and I say yes. He gets off me and lies down to sleep. I want to say something, but I don't. I don't want to take my mind off in the rainbow. I should get up and go to the toilet, but I don't. Besides, Charlie is asleep with his legs thrown over me. I can't move and I don't want to. But it ain't like that anymore. Most times he's thrashing away inside of me before I'm woke and through when I am. The rest of the time I can't even be next to his stinking drunk self. But I don't care about it. Don't care about it no more. My maker will take care of me. I know he will. I know he will. Besides, it don't make no difference about this earth. There is sure to be a glory. Only thing I miss sometimes is that rainbow. But like I say, I don't recollect it much anymore. So I had to walk away from the passage for a bit and really take a minute to process it. It is so like when it's in the context of this moment, when I read it in the context of today, with all the political drama that we are experiencing, I had to make sure that I read that and processed it in a personal way, right? Like the Bluest Eye, if you can imagine anything not being political, right, these days, it is personal. This is a story, when I read that passage, I was listening to a woman who was putting the pieces back together again, right? So essentially broken. She had been broken. And I know what that feels like. Because women break. Black women break, right? We do, in fact, have finite energy. Right? And then what we do is one by one, we put the pieces back together. And what she did was she dove into someone else's life for comfort. She dove into this family, this white family's life, a life that she wanted, perhaps deserved, perhaps we all do, right? A life of protection and abundance, beauty, right? Food, respect. And so she put herself in that family and became the ideal servant. And I've seen myself do that. I've seen myself throw myself into other people's lives. Good people, my children, my man, right? People I love, but throw myself, deep dive into their lives and then start creating order in their life, which I want to pretend is my life. Right? Organizing, I've seen myself do that. She organized the groceries and the kitchen and the pots and the pans, and I organized clothing and shoes at the front door, and mail and stuff around the house. I can organize all day long, trying to organize life, trying to make the world safe and make the world fit into some sort of pattern, which it never does. It never. Life will not be organized. But this is what we do when we break. This is what we do when we're scared, when we have been stripped. This is what we're looking at, is like we have to recall the moments of fear. Recall the moments of when someone takes your power. And then what do we do to survive? And so when I read that piece out loud and when I thought about it, it made me recall the way I have survived moments of trauma. And that is to try my best to organize the life around me, whether it was someone else's life that I wanted to take on, the small bit of life that I had left in me, my children's life. And I think that lasts for a while. It gives us some solace, right? A reprieve to fall into that is away from the world, the reality of the world, right? The heavy world. And so I think we have to respect that reprieve that she found, honor it as self-preservation, like what the mind does when it is so very hurt. And then we have to think about how we establish our own world, right? How we eventually create our own world, how we understand that what we've dove into is not ours, it is theirs. And so when I had to bring myself back to myself, I had to eventually say, your children are great, your man is great, they are lovely people, but you cannot own their lives. And you cannot live in their lives, right? So I had to untether from them, even from the people I love, untether from those folks that I thought were bigger and better than me, stronger and kinder, more pure than I. And then I had to create myself, right? And that is the hard part, like, putting the pieces back together and then creating the life that you want, right? We have to wade through a lot to get to the life that we want. Some of us don't even ever have that opportunity, right? Some of us never even have the opportunity to find the life that belongs to us. And so, I see her in this excerpt, surviving.